Lieutenant Governor, thank you for taking some time to talk with us today.
As always, my pleasure, Ashley.
You know, the second special session of the legislature ended last week, a few days shy of that 30-day time limit. Give us your thoughts on what was accomplished and what didn't happen.
So, first of all, I'm glad we were able to complete almost all the work. There still is one bill that, in particular, and a few others that we want to hopefully see added to the call when we come back here later in the month to work on redistricting maps and drawing those new lines as required by the Constitution. But it was a very successful session in the second time around. We passed Senate Bill 1, the election integrity bill that does make it easier to vote and harder to cheat. We passed Senate Bill 3 through the House, and that was the critical race theory, banning that in our schools. We don't want any students told that they're a victim or an aggressor. We just want every student, regardless of their color, or their race, their background, to be treated equally in a classroom. We also passed the social media bill that has been blocking a lot of conservative sites, quite frankly, blocking emails and also making sure that Facebook and Twitter and other major players don't block out conservative content or liberal content. We want to, everyone should have a free speech to say what they want on the internet, and they don't get a chance to choose. And then, of course, we passed a number of other bills, including a property tax bill, Ashley, that got little notice, Senate Bill 91. It didn't make it through the House, but I'm asking the governor to put it on the call again. This would totally change the mindset of budgeting in Austin, because it would say anytime the legislature has extra money, and some years we do, before finding a way to spend it, we need to find a way to send it back to taxpayers for their property taxes. So a lot of things happened in the second special session. And on many of these bills, as you know, Ashley, we passed them in April, and many of them didn't get through the House. We passed them in the first special session, but the Democrats weren't there, so they didn't pass. And we've passed them again in this session. So my senators worked really hard over and over and over to get these important bills passed.
You talked about that property tax relief bill,
Yes.
But there's another bill that you asked the governor to put on this next call, and that's a bill related to the transgender sports. You know,
Yes.
The legislation passed the Senate more than once, as you pointed out. It's one of those bills that you passed, but it doesn't seem to really be the will of the House to pass that measure. So why keep pushing for that legislation?
Because it's the right thing to do. And I am asking the governor to put that back on the call again. I don't understand why it's not coming out of the House. It's not like a Democrat's blocking it. It's in a Republican-chaired committee. Because, look, it's just basic fairness. We're not trying to be against anyone and their lifestyle. That's their decision. But we also can't take away the rights of girls and women. And allowing boys to play girl sports is just unfair. Boys can run faster, hit the ball longer if they're playing softball, hit three-point shots and rebound better. They can beat girls in track and field. As I said, they can run faster. They can beat them in wrestling. That's already happened in Texas because they're stronger. It's just not fair. I mean, I have boys and girls in my family, kids and grandchildren. Boys have an unfair advantage, and it's not right that girls might not get a spot on the team, not get a chance to play, not get a scholarship. It's just not right. And that's the reason that bill is important to me. It's the right thing to do for girls and women. And by the way, not only does it have overwhelming support, 90% with Republicans, but it has overwhelming support with independents, 70% or more in our polls. And depending on the poll that you look at, Ashley, 25 to 35 or 40% of Democrats support this. Fathers, mothers, they know it's just not right for boys to take their girl's spot on a team and take their opportunities away.
You've mentioned that it was going to a Republican committee, but it's been going to public ed, which is chaired by Democrat Harold Dutton.
I'm sorry.
Do you think that it should go to a different committee?
Yeah. No, I stand corrected on that. I was thinking of another bill. It should go to another committee. It should go to a Republican committee. Let me rephrase that. It should go to a Republican committee that's chaired by a Republican. Because Harold Dutton is a Democrat. He obviously doesn't support the bill, although he let it out in the regular session. He let it out in the regular session, but he didn't let it out this time. And if it gets to the floor, it will pass with overwhelming majority of votes. Members want to vote on it. So it needs to go. I misspoke there. I'm sorry. It's been a long day.
I understand. You know, you mentioned that this past session and the regular were wins for conservative policies.
Yes.
In fact, you mentioned that during the Senate Bill 1 signing Tuesday. Obviously, Texas is a big state with a lot of people who have a lot of different views. So why do you believe that these conservative policies are best for all Texans?
Well, let's look at Senate Bill 1, the election bill. I think the Democrats just dug in on a bill that they were against early, and they just couldn't come back from being wrong. You know, they went to Washington, they said this is a terrible bill, it's voter suppression. I challenge anyone to read the bill and find that for me. We are adding hours to early voting, for example. We are saying for the first time in Texas that if you need to get off work to vote early, which you can now on election day, we're now allowing that for early voting. We are saying to mail-in ballots. Right now, if you make a mistake and your handwriting's kind of sloppy and you send in your mail-in ballot, if they can't read it, it's discarded. We're now having a cure process. This was actually a Democrat amendment on it, I believe, but we supported it. It says, hey, if they'll call you and say, hey, we can't read, you know, exactly, we want to be sure your ballot counts. That's why we're asking to put some identification and a number on the envelope so we can go back to that person. So in those three areas alone, we're expanding voting. And in Texas, Ashley, and I said this on Tuesday at the bill signing up in Tyler, Texas, that if you look at Texas, the Democrats say it's hard to vote. You know, look, this is nonsense. Texas has increased voting more than any other state in the last 10 years. We've increased voting in the gubernatorial races by 76%. When Governor Abbott and I ran in 2014, there were about 5 million votes total for the Democrats and the two of us. When we ran in 18, it was 8.5 million. The presidential race, when Trump and Hillary Clinton ran against each other in 16, there were about 8.9 million. Trump-Biden was over 11 million. So it's just this nonsense that it's hard to vote in Texas. 95% of all Texans, that's RD and independents, in a Texas Association of Business poll said it's easy to vote in Texas. We have more early vote in Texas than Delaware, where the president's from, than New York, than New Jersey, Massachusetts, all big blue states. So I'm tired of hearing this voter suppression. When I passed, along with other senators, I was one of the many authors on it in 2011, the photo voter ID, we heard the same thing. Well, not everyone can have a photo ID, and you're going to suppress the vote. And that was really the turnaround of more people voting because people felt confident about who was voting. You know, a lot of people don't vote if they don't think their vote counts. And in Texas, they know their vote counts, so they show up to vote. And one last stat for you, Ashley, in 2011, of all of our registered voters, not everyone registers, but all of our registered voters in the state, only about 58% actually voted. Now it's close to 67%. So we've done a good job. This bill expanded opportunities, and it focused on making sure that all 254 counties are the same. Harris County, on their own, against the law, created drive-in voting and all-night voting. That was against the law. They did it anyway. And so we're just saying, no, we can't have one county decide this law and another county do that law, another county do this law. We give them parameters on the hours they can vote, but we're not going to let one county go off and create their own laws. And so this whole idea that we're cutting back voting is just untrue. Overnight voting, which is not needed, because our polls are now open from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. If you're working the all-night shift, you can vote before you go to work or when you get off of work. And the drive-in voting, as I tell everyone, Ashley, that people say, well, why not? I said, well, when you go in to vote, and you're with your husband, let's say, or your wife, the two of you don't go to the same machine to vote. It's a private vote. You don't take in, you know, your friends to vote. If an automobile pulls up and there's 4 or 5 family members, guess what? Hey, who are you voting for? No, you should vote for that person. No, you're wrong about voting for that person. It's the privacy of the vote. And not all husbands and wives, for example, vote alike, or brothers and sisters, or fathers and adult children, or mothers and adult children. So it's the privacy to vote. We still let people with disabilities do that, but the drive-in voting destroys the privacy to vote.
You know, I want to touch on a few things that you mentioned. It is true that early voting hours were the minimum. Early voting hours were expanded under Senate Bill 1.
Only because of COVID, actually. We didn't expand, last year, but under Senate Bill 1, we are expanding the hours.
Right, that's what I was saying.
We're expanding the hours of voting for early voting in Texas.
Right, and so, but do you see the point that Democrats say? You mentioned Houston, and you said that they broke the law by allowing But it's not necessarily in the code that they couldn't do it, which is why they did it and the courts allowed them to do it.
Yeah, well, no, the actually, and that was the other argument some were making. Well, we rolled back early vote. No, we added 1 week just because of COVID. That was all last time. And so what happened actually is a lawsuit was filed against drive-in voting. And on drive-in voting, a judge said the particular person who brought the lawsuit didn't have standing. But if they could have ruled, they would have said it violates the Constitution that voting has to be in a building. That's what the judge said. So he would have ruled in the favor of that. And by the way, we still have about 1,800 votes from the drive-in voting that to this day Harris County can't account for. They can't reconcile 1,800 votes. That's a lot of votes. And on the overnight voting, so they couldn't do it. And then the overnight voting, no, we had specific hours before in voting. It was 7A, I believe, before the new law, 7A to 7P in early voting. And again, I stand corrected, I may be off an hour, but now it's 6A to 10P, and the local jurisdictions can make a decision in that. But when they went to overnight voting, that was something they did on their own. So we just wanted to, look, you can't even get election workers paid or volunteers to work, the 10, 15 hours a day normal. Trying to get people to show up at 3 o'clock in the morning and to run is a stress on the system. And secondly, no one needs to be able to vote at 3 o'clock in the morning. As Mama used to say, nothing good happens after midnight. Well, that's for a lot of things in life. And if you can vote between 6 in the morning and 10 p.m., even if you work the 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. shift or the midnight to 8, you can vote before or after.
So, but I want to ask you, you say that
yes.
you pointed out we expanded early voting because of COVID. And that's why Harris County created this 24-hour polling, and they had people voting overnight. They did have people go in. So it was something that people took advantage of.
Well, there were some people, of course there are going to be some people that take advantage of it. If you have a store that closes at 10 o'clock, and pick any store, grocery store, retail store, if they're open at 3 o'clock in the morning, somebody will show up and buy something. I mean, but it's not needed, it's not practical. And again, voting is 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., 2 weeks before the election. We now say your employer has to give you off if you're not able to vote during early voting in the given times. We give you off on election day. Again, we have more early voting than Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, and the home state of the president. And how come the Democrats aren't actually, that's where they ought to be lobbying to say, hey, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Delaware, why don't you do what Texas is doing? Give our people more time to vote.
You pointed out that we are waiting for that third special session call. You say it's going to happen later this month. You gave us a little bit of a hint there.
I'm making a good guess. Okay. I don't want to tell secrets.
Well, lawmakers have to redraw those political maps, the process called redistricting for folks who aren't familiar. But there are 2 senators who are part of a lawsuit that are challenging the third session with the argument that redistricting has to happen during a regular session, that's the language in the Constitution. What are your thoughts on that argument?
I never step in front of a judge and what decision they're going to make or on appeal. We think it's frivolous because the Constitution, the federal Constitution says we have to redraw the lines. Every state, every county, every jurisdiction, we have to redraw the lines every 10 years based on the census. Now, the Biden administration really slowed down us getting the census data this time. I don't know who was behind it. Maybe just incompetence. I'm not sure. But we normally get those numbers in April or May so we can draw the lines in a normal session. We just got the numbers about 10 days ago. So we're kind of up against the clock. And so these 2 senators, and it's in their right, anybody can go to court and find a lawyer to file a lawsuit. They're saying that we can't draw these maps until the next regular session. And there are many of us who just disagree, but it's up to the courts to decide on that.
You say the Biden administration slowed it down, but some of the lawsuits that were happening and the pause were under the Trump administration. Plus, we had the pandemic, which was the reason that the Census Bureau gave us for why they couldn't, be able to turn the numbers in the normal amount of time. Why do you say it's the Biden administration's fault?
Well, because when President Trump was still in office, we talked about these things, about when would we get the numbers. I thought President Trump would win the election, so I wasn't really thinking about the Democrats. But it did slow down a little bit because of COVID, because not enough people were turning in their census forms. And So we had heard that we'd get the numbers sometime in February or March at the latest. That was under President Trump. When President Biden came in, suddenly, nope, we can't get those numbers for you in February or March. It'll be maybe late April or May, maybe the summer, maybe the middle of August. And so I'm glad we have them, but it has slowed down the process. But it's in the it's in the United States Constitution. We have to account for the shifts in voting. You can't just kick it down the road, as these, in my belief, as these two Democrat senators want to in the Texas Senate, because that would mean, let me tell you what, if that happened, there'd be lawsuits saying that our elections weren't legal because the district lines weren't redrawn. But again, that'll be up to the courts to decide, and I'm sure it'll be appealed, and no matter who wins the first round. So the judges will decide that in the end.
You know, considering the fact that Texas is going to have another seat in Congress, how crucial is this third special session with this redistricting process going to be?
Well, it's going to be another 2 seats, it looks like, I believe. Don't know that for sure, but I believe that's. I don't really get involved in the congressional maps. We draw the Senate maps. The senators do in the Senate. They draw the Senate maps after public hearings, and we're going to draw fair and legal maps. And the House, they draw the House maps. Together, the State Board of Education maps have to be drawn, but Congress usually will send us their ideas. Trust me, all those congressmen have an idea. And so this is a perfect example. If we don't get a chance to draw the maps now in this special session, we wouldn't have 2 added congressional seats. And I don't know if there'll be Democrat seats or Republican seats, but we wouldn't have those 2 seats. And so I think that's why the courts may rule that we have to follow the Constitution and account for this realignment.
Lieutenant Governor, do you have any final thoughts for our viewers just on kind of the state of politics right now in Texas?
Most of what we pass is bipartisan. For example, the bail bond reform to keep murderers in jail and not let them out on bond. Now, I'm surprised it didn't get more Democrat support, but we did get 4 or 5 senators to vote for that. On our education bill to fund virtual schools for children who need it. We want to get kids back in the class, but some kids still need it. That was a bipartisan bill. The election bill, even though we didn't have Democrats vote for it, that's going to help all voters have more access and the mail-in ballots to be sure their ballots are cured if there's a mistake. So there are always a few bills each session, that there are going to be Republicans, Democrats that split on. Because that's why there are 2 parties. There's a difference of opinion on legislation. But last session in 2019, out of 1,800 bills we passed roughly, I believe the number is, and I'm going to give a ballpark number, but this is pretty close, less than 30 bills passed only with Republican votes out of 1,800. And my guess is when we total up the bills this session, and we've passed fewer bills this session for many reasons, mainly because we started because of COVID. We took a little slower, and we didn't have as committee meetings, and everyone just decided to slow the pace down. But my guess is we passed, between 1,300 and 1,500 bills. And again, I bet you not more than 25 passed with only Republican votes. So in Texas, despite the Democrats walking out and going to Washington, despite all the hubbub over, 2 or 3 bills that got a lot of attention, most of what we do is govern in Texas as 2 parties. And that is still a hallmark that I'm proud of in the Texas legislature. But there's always going to be a difference. And on those differences, there will be a fight. Whether it's a pro-life bill or an election bill or a Second Amendment bill, there's a difference between the parties. And that's why some identify as Ds and some are, and some independents. But I want the people of Texas to know what they're seeing by the walkout or the filibuster or some of the, the media or the leftist, I call it leftist propaganda, that's just a small sample. The big sample is we work together pretty well, much better than they do in Washington, I can assure you.
Well, Governor Patrick, we thank you so much for taking some time
Sure.
to chat with us today.
Thank you, Ashley, as always.
Have a good one.